This is IBM Museum. And I did have to change the scene from the other videos I'm doing tonight. This is the last one of the evening. So I put things back. And in a previous video, I showed how I have a IBM PS2 65SX planar that's benched out here. It's got adapters in there. And it's got a SCSI adapter from IBM called the Tribble and a perfectly functional hard drive attached. And as I explained in that previous video, I was going through to where bench testing the system, I would power it on and it wouldn't boot from the hard drive. A perfectly configured system would go through to where it would just drop me into ROM Basic after it went through and spun up the SCSI hard drive. And I would typically have to have a boot diskette in there and then switch over to the hard drive after the system booted from that diskette just to get into the hard drive. Did all kinds of troubleshooting to swap the hard drive to other systems and things like that, figure out it boots there. I have my suspicions. I'll go through and troubleshoot that a little bit more. But this is kind of a follow-up to the point where in the previous video, I learned that if I went through and I inserted the adapter, I wanted to actually be, ironically, I wanted to be dropped into ROM Basic in that instance, and I did not go through, just trying to move quick. I didn't go through and remove the hard drive controller and hard drive from the system. I left them connected, figure it's going to throw me into ROM Basic anyway. Who cares if the hard drive is connected or not? I plugged in a additional adapter in the system because I wanted to get the adapter ID of that. I thought going through on ROM Basic, I could go through and type in that program that my modification and what Peter Wendt had, and it would give me, the adapter ID of that. And I was pleasantly surprised when I powered the system on without anything in the diskette drive, and it gave me the 165 error. But when I press the F1 key, the system continues. And we'll bring up the video capture for that because there's one instance I want to show that it's actually better than me typing in that that ROM Basic program in there to get the adapter ID. And I want to show people this other utility and where they can get it, because Major Tom does have it up at the Arden tool if you do not have PC-DOS. So let's get it to where it'll get me the video capture with me still on the screen. Okay. And I hear it from here. It's probably not very evident from the headset with me talking, especially, but I heard it spin up the SCSI hard drive. Okay. As we see, it throws me into ROM Basic. So repeating the sequence, going through, adding the adapter I want to identify, and this is actually an HP ScanJet adapter. And I'll just put that in the slot 1. We will go through and start up the system again. And of course, putting that in there, it wants to run through the configuration now. But I still have not put any reference diskette or boot diskette otherwise in that diskette drive. Okay, so we get the 165 error and the not okay symbol, RTFM symbol from IBM, and me pressing the F1. This is where I was expecting to get dropped into ROM Basic. And I could go through and type the program in and things like that. And that wouldn't have been a video. I mean, I was just going through and side little task of doing things. when I press F1, it started booting the hard drive. I don't know the system. I don't have an autoexec.bat, so it's prompting me for time and date. And yes, it is that late here. And as we can see there, it's PC-DOS, and this is version 6.10. PC-DOS meaning it's from IBM. It's the IBM flavor, not from Microsoft. And there was, of course, a number of versions they coordinated together. But I think from, and probably Major Tom or someone else can correct me, starting, I believe, from the version from PC-DOS 5, and I've got that. I've still got it shrink wrapped. You can also download it from WinWorld. You can download these PC-DOS versions, 6.1, 6.3, 7. I think there may even be the PC-DOS 2000, which is supposed to be the Y2K fix version. But if you want what I'm going to show here for yourself, it's at the Arden Tool, and I'll provide the link of where that is as well. And it also has the same thing. I've gone through on my channel. I've done the System Information Tool. It's abbreviated SIT on many of the PS2 systems. They're supported. There are supported models. There's not, some unsupported models. Typically, if it's a 286 or below, it's not supported by the System Information Tool. And the this QCONFIG that's included with PC-DOS, it's much more, it's not the full screen, mouse support, other stuff, but it's a lot of information. In fact, it's so much information, I need to go through the more command here. And it's actually good that it booted from the hard drive, because on my diskette drive, my boot diskette, I don't have the path statement set up, and more is an additional command. And all that means is give me one screenful at a time. Give me the first screen. When I press any key, in particular like the space bar, it give me the next screen. And there's more than one screen to this QCONFIG. This QCONFIG is also in the MS-DOS directory. So I would have had to gone through and change directory over to the DOS directory. It's set up just like under MS-DOS. It's C:\DOS. So on this first page, and it takes a little bit of time to go through and figure out, to check the system. And I'll probably have to drop the webcam at some point here. Oh, I'd probably fit on that screen. Yeah, I fit on the side of that. So we see the operating system IBM PC-DOS version 6.00. And actually this is effectively referred to as 6.1, PC-DOS 6.1. And the reason IBM did that was that Microsoft already had its MS-DOS 6, and even probably had come out with or certainly when Microsoft did the next version, it was 6.20, and then 6.21 and 6.22. And probably IBM right in after Microsoft released the MS-DOS 6, they released it, and they actually called it DOS 6.1. And they're going through and deliberately avoiding the Microsoft numbering to try to avoid confusion. Microsoft went through and they had MS-DOS 6.20, 6.21, 6.22, and then IBM came out with the upgrade to this that they numbered as 6.3. And then for the next version, they had PC-DOS 7. And PC-DOS 2000 is, as I say, it's the Y2K fixes applied to PC-DOS 7. Effectively all the same. Of course, if anyone wants to correct me, they can do so in the comments. But it goes through and it provides a lot of information, the date and time right there at the top. And keep in mind, this is a system that we went through and it's misconfigured as it was, or it wanted me to run the reference diskette. It has the product number, that 8565-0121. And that is the match exactly for the PS2 model and submodel I have. And just because I have the 128 the 120 megabyte hard drive, that makes it the 121 model. And so it's going through and compiling actually quite a bit of detail there, to be able to identify this as that 121 submodel. The model encoding is 8565. The submodel encoding is at 121. And who knows, if I put an odd-sized hard drive on there that the program was not aware of, I don't know how it would respond. So it has the model ID of F8, a lot of the same information that we see in the system information tool. And as I had said before in the SIT discussions, it is F8 is a 386SX or above. And that's what the CPU that the 65SX has normally on it, on the planar, is the plastic quad flat pack 386SX 16 megahertz. And I've had prior videos talking about looking for that C step marking on the 386SX 16 megahertz CPU to see if you're able to do what's called a clip over upgrade. And they're very uncommon CPU upgrades out there, but that's what I was wanting to do. And I've done actually on this planar, as we'll go through and see here in a moment. The 20 megahertz 386SXs are the last stepping, that C step anyway. So they're not the A and B step that didn't have that. They had that a non-functional float pin, or didn't have the float pin on them to disable that CPU that's soldered to the planar. And then you put the clip over on top of it that has a 1-to-1 vampires into those pins and disables that CPU underneath, and runs, it's typically an upgrade like to the 46 level, as I have in this case, modified, in this case, a Texas Instruments 46 SLC, 24-bit address bus, 16-bit data bus, of the same limitations that the 386 SX CPU has, and the 286 of the address and data lines, and also the 46, the 386 SLC from IBM, and the 46 SLC2 and SLC3 from IBM. So it has a submodel ID of 1C. The BIOS revision of 00, there's only one BIOS for the 65SX, and the BIOS date of the 8th of February, 1990. It identifies the machine type there as IBM PS2 model 65SX, and that little dash and says compatible. I mean, they're probably using that as a disclaimer to say it looks so close to a 65SX that we're going to call it one anyway. And the processor, you notice there, it says Intel 80486SX, and that's actually misidentified here. It's a Texas Instruments 46 SLC, but the program is identifying that it runs the 46 opcodes and it doesn't have a math coprocessor. So it's equivalent. It's able to run all the 46, the Intel 46SX instructions. And so it is able to classify as that. And I'll have to get through with the estimated speed. I don't think it's any sort of clock doubling or anything like that. It just uses the base frequency that CPU on the planar has of 16 megahertz, and we have 17.3 megahertz right here. Coprocessor, none, not in this planar. I don't have a 387 SX or 387 SL math coprocessor, or any of the Cyrix fast math CPUs that are applicable to that being in that plastic leaded chip carrier socket for that type of FPU. Bus type is microchannel 16-bit bus. Keyboard type is enhanced. I have on my 101 keyboard, Molim. Equipment is 2 parallel ports, 4 serial ports, 1 diskette drive, and 1 fixed disk. And that's similar to the information from the system information tool. It just gives a number of parallel and serial ports. And actually the number of parallel and especially the number of serial ports is from the modem and the multi-IO, Boca multi-IO board that I have on there. The Boca IO board has a parallel port and 2 serial ports. There's a modem, a microchannel modem on here from Practical Peripherals that also takes up a COM port or serial port. And then it has a serial port and parallel port on the planar itself. So that's how it's deriving that count. It sees a diskette drive. Like I say, I didn't have a bootable diskette or anything like that, but of course the drive is properly connected and functional. And then 1 fixed disk. That's what IBM called hard drives, is fixed disk or DASD, all sorts of hard file, all sorts of strange little things. And unlike the system information tool, it does say, have the serial port 1 through 4 addresses that it marks there, and the parallel port addresses. And so it goes a little bit further than the system information tool in that regard. It says SCSI device total is 1 units and disk 1 units. Since it gives me a little more at the bottom telling me there's more information, if I press, just as easy to press the space bar, press any key. You look on the keyboard and you won't find the any key, but pressing any key on the keyboard gives you that. I don't think I'm really I'm obscuring a little bit here. Primary video is VGA. Diskette drive 1 is 3.50 or 3.5 inch, 1.44 megabyte, 80 tracks, and it is a type 4. I've not seen the indication of what type is necessarily done for a diskette drive like that. I guess I think they were doing the 360 KB, the 720 KB, and maybe it's in that count like that of type 4, I think is the closest thing. Fixed disk 1, 115 megabyte. It even breaks it down to so many KB and so many bytes. It goes through and really translates that out into what the space on the drive is. Local drive C, and it has the size again and the available space on the drive. And very similar, you can drill in on the system information tool. It's telling 109.5 megabytes is available. That was the part that was obscuring with the webcam. So I'll put that back on the screen. Total memory shows as that close to 4 megabyte, but 3.8. There's the conventional extended memory adapter ROM, and that is on that Tribble SCSI adapter. And that's why it has SCSI off to the right. But it has the address of where that ROM is. And you can see that on the system information tool as well. They've got a particular screen full of information for these areas. And then it has the planar ID, which system information tool also gives. It gives the decoding of that, the PS2 Mol 65, 16 megahertz planar. Total slots is 8. System, in parentheses, disk 1. User slots list is 7. So they're effectively saying one of those slots is used for the hard drive controller, effectively. or if that would be to be the DBA ESDI, that direct bus attachment ESDI type of drive, that being one of the slots. But they say the user slots. There's 7 other slots in this Model 65SX being a tower microchannel system, and the expansion slot 1, and that's where I popped in that adapter that I was wanting to test. So I get the same thing. I get the adapter ID from this, booted to the hard drive. Didn't have to type in the program. I'm getting a lot more information, and it even identifies it. It's as the HP ScanJet 2C adapter, and in expansion slot 2, there's no adapter present. Expansion slot 3 is that ID 7401, the Mountain Computer Mach 2 streaming tape drive adapter. And if you remember from a video I did previously, just recently, I went through and I ran that ROM basic program, and it didn't see the leading 0 in that second part of the adapter ID. So it listed as 741. And it even confused me on video. I just said, pull the adapter. I looked for that. I thought it was 0741 and was corrected by Major Tom to say, that probably means 7401. It's suppressing the 0 in that second byte of information. And here in QCONFIG, we see it identified fully. Of course, the ROM basic problem is really short, sweet. There's ways to go through there and mark that and check to make sure what information is in the first byte, what's in the second byte. But this does very well. And thus, the system is not even configured or anything else for this adapter. That's what threw us into being able to boot from the hard drive. And then expansion slot 4 is no adapter present. Expansion slot 5 is the ID 6FCB, that practical peripherals internal modem. So it's identifying all the adapters I have in here. Expansion slot 6, no adapter present. Expansion slot 7 is that ID 60E5, that Boca Research serial parallel adapter. And as I say, it's 1 parallel port on that adapter, that tiny little adapter, and then 2 serial ports. Expansion slot number 8 is the 8EFE IBM PS2 SCSI adapter, known in this instance as the Tribble, nicknamed by IBM as a Tribble. They were having Star Trek sort of little nicknames, like OS2 they called Worf, codename Worf. The cached SCSI adapter is called the Spock. So there are other Star Trek, a few Star Trek, although IBM did golf courses, they did cars, Chevy cars, all sorts of things. But that's the end of QCONFIG, and I'll give the link in the video description because Major Tom has it up at the Arden Tool. He has even the PC-DOS 2000 version. It's there. So you can download it. You can run it on your PS2s as well to go through and get very similar information. In some cases, a little bit more detail even than the system information tool. Not the full screen and all sorts of things with the color and everything else, but just a DOS program that you could run that gave that information. And I'm not really sure if there's a QCONFIG on the OS2 side as well. I think just like IBM had a system information tool for OS2, they may have had, I had, the way I have the memory, that they had a QCONFIG for OS2 as well. So I'm going to go through it. I'll get the keyboard off my lap, get facing the computer. We can leave this up for the outro. It's good. Some good detail showing the QCONFIG program in operation. And if you thought that this video was informative, click on that like button. As always, like, my videos. I really love it. Comment on the videos. If you want to do a correction, comment on my videos too. But subscribe as well. Recommend it to your friends that are interested in this sort of content so they can subscribe too. But this is IBM is in. That's all I have for now. Thank you.